Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the quiet office like a secret meant only for me. "You'll stay late." I froze for a second, the spreadsheet on my monitor blurring as her words settled in. When I looked up, she was already standing there, leaning lightly against the frame of my cubicle, her arms crossed in that effortless way that made her look both commanding and graceful. Ms. Carter, 48, maybe 50. Sharp black skirt, silk blouse the color of midnight, heels that clicked softly against the tile. She was my boss. She was untouchable. Or at least, she was supposed to be. I swallowed, trying to find my voice, but she didn't wait for an answer. She turned on those heels, her perfume, a quiet mix of jasmine and something darker, warmer, following her as she disappeared into her office. My hands were still shaking when I shut down my computer and walked to her door. The office was nearly empty now, just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant buzz of the elevator. I knocked lightly. "Come in," she said, and there was something softer in her tone now, something that pulled me in before I even realized I'd moved. She didn't look up right away. She was at her desk, sleeves rolled up, a pair of reading glasses perched low on her nose as she signed a stack of papers. She always carried herself like the world couldn't touch her, but up close, in that quiet room, she felt almost human. "Close the door," she said. I did. Then, slowly, deliberately, she stood and crossed the room. She didn't stop until she was at the window, and with one smooth motion, she reached up, pulled the blinds down, and turned to face me. The room dimmed, shadows softening everything between us. I should have looked away. I should have done 100 things. But I just couldn't. Her eyes found mine, steady and calm, and in that silence I felt something shift, like the entire office had tilted on its axis. My breath caught when she stepped closer, closing the distance inch by inch until I could see the faint line of tiredness at the corner of her eyes, the slight tremor in her fingers when they brushed the edge of her desk. "You've been working hard," she said, her voice lower now. "Long hours. Quiet. Reliable." Her gaze flicked down, then up again, as if measuring me. "Do you know how rare that is?" My throat was dry. I guess." She smiled, just barely, and it wasn't the kind of smile you gave in a meeting or over coffee in the break room. This one was different. Softer. More dangerous. I could feel the tension building in the space between us, sharp and magnetic. Every detail burned itself into me. The way her hair caught the faint light, the way her blouse clung when she moved, the faint warmth radiating off her skin when she reached past me for a file on the shelf. And then her hand brushed mine. Just for a second. A touch so small it could have been an accident, except it wasn't. I looked at her, and for the briefest moment, her confidence cracked. There it was, that quiet, vulnerable flicker in her expression that told me this wasn't just her game. Then, the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Someone laughing, too close, heading toward the office. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. "Stay," she whispered. And before I could answer, the doorknob started to turn. The door swung open, and for a split second, every nerve in my body locked in place. "Forgot my keys," one of the junior analysts muttered, not even glancing at us as he grabbed something off the table and hurried out again. The door clicked shut. Silence. I let out a shaky breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. She didn't move. Neither did I. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had narrowed to this room, to the space between us, just a few feet, but it felt charged, electric. Then she stepped back. "Sit," she said softly, gesturing toward the chair in front of her desk. Her voice wasn't sharp anymore, wasn't her usual no-nonsense tone. It was softer, careful. I sat, trying not to look as restless as I felt. She walked around to her side of the desk, sinking into her chair. "You know," she said after a pause, "when I was your age, I thought people in my position had everything figured out." I blinked. It was such an unexpected thing to hear from her, Miss Carter, who always seemed unshakable, untouchable. "I didn't," she continued, her eyes fixed on the papers in front of her, but not really seeing them. "And now I realize maybe you never really do." There was something in her voice, tired, maybe, lonely, and it hit me that for all her poise and confidence, she spent more time in this office than anywhere else. I thought about how often I'd seen her eating lunch at her desk, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes during those Friday happy hours the team dragged her to. I wanted to say something. Something comforting, or at least human. But the words got stuck somewhere in my throat. Instead, I just nodded. Guess that makes two of us, I said quietly. That got her attention. She looked up then, really looked at me, and for the first time I didn't feel like her subordinate. I just felt seen. Her gaze lingered longer than it should have. And when she spoke again, it was almost a whisper. You shouldn't spend so much time here, she said. You're young. You should be out there. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Out there doing what? It's not like there's anyone waiting for me at home. She tilted her head, studying me. No girlfriend. Not anymore, I admitted. It ended a while ago. Something shifted in her expression, something I couldn't quite name. Understanding, maybe. Or maybe it was recognition. Me neither, she said softly. Not for a long time. The room felt smaller after that. Quieter. Like we were the only two people in the world who understood what it meant to be needed everywhere, but never truly wanted anywhere. I caught myself staring at the way a strand of her hair had come loose and curved against her cheek, at the faint smudge of ink on her wrist where her sleeve had ridden up. She must have noticed, because her lips curved just slightly, the ghost of a smile, before she reached for another file. But as she leaned forward to pass it to me, her hand brushed my shoulder. Just a light touch, barely there. Still, it sent a jolt straight through me. I tried to play it off, but my fingers trembled when I took the folder. Her eyes flicked to the movement, lingered, and then, just as quickly, looked away. We didn't talk much after that. She gave instructions, I nodded. She signed a few more documents, I filed them. But every moment was filled with that quiet tension, like we were both balancing on the edge of something we didn't dare name. When I finally stood to leave, she rose too, walking me to the door. Too close. Close enough that her shoulder brushed my arm as she reached for the handle. Thank you for staying late, she murmured, her breath brushing the side of my neck. I turned, meaning to answer, but the words got lost somewhere between my chest and my throat when I met her eyes. There was no boss, no employee, no lines of authority in that look. Just two people, equally exposed, equally unsure. Neither of us moved. Not yet. But in that pause, in that quiet heartbeat where the world seemed to hold still, something unspoken sparked to life. The office felt different the next morning. Brighter, louder, alive in a way that didn't match the storm still swirling in my chest. I told myself it was just another day. That what had happened last night, what almost happened, was nothing. Just a moment. A charged silence that I had imagined into something more. But then she walked in. Ms. Carter. Dark hair pinned neatly, a pale blue blouse tucked perfectly into her skirt. No trace of the quiet, vulnerable woman I'd glimpsed in the dim light of her office. She nodded at me as she passed my desk, professional, unreadable. And yet, as her eyes caught mine for the briefest second, I felt it. That flicker, that pull. I tried to focus on my work. I tried to pretend. But every time she spoke, every time she leaned over a colleague's desk or brushed by my chair, my pulse betrayed me. By lunch, I gave up pretending and stayed at my desk while the others went out. The quiet felt safer. Until her voice broke it. You didn't eat. I looked up, startled. She was standing at the edge of my cubicle, a paper bag in her hand. I wasn't hungry, I muttered. She raised an eyebrow. You can lie to the others, she said softly. But don't lie to me. Then she set the bag down on my desk and turned away. It was a small thing. A sandwich, a note written in her neat, looping script. Don't work yourself to death. See, but it burned in my chest all afternoon. By evening, most of the team had left. I stayed late again, telling myself it was about deadlines. It wasn't. When I finally stood to stretch, I caught sight of her through the glass walls of her office. She was still there, head bowed over her desk, glasses perched on her nose. The sight pulled me like gravity. I knocked lightly. Come in, she said, just like last night. The room felt smaller this time, warmer. You should go home, she murmured without looking up. So should you. I replied, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. That made her pause. Slowly, she looked up, and there it was again, that softness, that hesitation that made her seem less like my boss and more like her. Why are you really here? She asked. The question lodged in my throat. I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, a sharp knock rattled the door. We both froze. Hey, Carter, one of the senior partners called from the hall. Forgot to sign off on that expense report. Got a minute? She straightened instantly, slipping back into her mask. Just a second, she said, her voice smooth and steady. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how close we were, how little space there had been between us. I could still feel the ghost of her perfume, still see the way her hair had fallen loose around her shoulders. When the footsteps faded, she exhaled slowly, her shoulders softening. "This is," she started, but stopped herself. "Wrong," I offered, my voice low. She didn't answer, not out loud. Instead, she stepped closer, so close that I could feel the heat of her body, see the faint rise and fall of her chest. Her eyes searched mine, not for permission, but for reassurance, like she needed to know I felt it too. I did. Every nerve in me screamed to close the distance, to bridge the inch that separated us. But she stopped just short of touching me, her hand hovering at my arm like a secret she couldn't quite share. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "We can't." And still, neither of us moved away. I told myself to stay away the next day, to keep my head down, to work, go home, and let whatever this was burn itself out. But by evening, the office had emptied again, and I was still there. So was she. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me, walking toward her office under the excuse of checking on the report. Maybe it was her, leaving her door cracked open, as if waiting. Either way, I was standing there again, hand on the doorframe, heart pounding in my ears. She looked up from her desk, surprise flickering across her face for the briefest second before something else, something softer, took its place. "You're still here," she said. "So are you." I answered, my voice lower than I'd intended. Her lips curved, faintly. "You're making a habit of this." "Maybe," I said, stepping closer. "Maybe I don't mind." The silence that followed was heavy, charged. She set her pen down, slow and deliberate, like even that small movement mattered. Then she stood. I'd seen her stand 100 times before, but never like this. Never with that quiet, unspoken tension rippling between us, making every inch of space feel dangerous. "You shouldn't," she murmured, though her voice lacked conviction. "Tell me to leave," I whispered. She didn't. Instead, she stepped around the desk, closing the distance between us until we were breathing the same air. My pulse roared in my ears. I don't even remember deciding to move, but suddenly my hand was at her cheek, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her breath hitched, quiet but sharp, and for a moment she leaned into my touch, her eyes closing like she was surrendering to something she'd been fighting for too long. "This is," she started, her voice breaking. "I know," I said. "I don't care." Her eyes opened then, and what I saw in them undid me. Desire, yes, but also fear, longing, and something that felt achingly like hope. "People will talk," she whispered, though it sounded more like a plea than a warning. "Let them," I said, and I meant it. She shook her head, but she didn't step back. If anything, she moved closer until her hand was resting on my chest, her fingers curling against the fabric like she needed to feel the proof of my heartbeat. The world outside that office didn't exist anymore. There was just the faint hum of the lights, the steady rhythm of my pulse, and the impossible nearness of her. "You don't know what this could cost me," she said, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before. "Then let me be the one to risk it," I whispered. Her breath caught, sharp and uneven, and before I knew it, her forehead was resting against mine. Every nerve in my body screamed to close the distance, to finally take what we'd both been denying for too long. I leaned in, just enough that I could feel the heat of her lips hovering near mine, the faint tremor in her hands as she gripped my shirt like she was holding on to something she knew she'd lose if she let go. And then, a sharp knock on the door shattered the moment, loud and jarring. "Carter," a voice called from the hallway. "You in there?" We froze, breathless, inches apart, hearts pounding like we'd been caught doing something forbidden. Her eyes locked on mine, wide and conflicted, and for a moment I thought, hoped, she might finally stop running. Then, in the faintest whisper, almost a confession, she said, "Don't leave." The knock faded, footsteps retreating down the hall, but the moment was shattered. She pulled back first, just a fraction, but enough to leave a chill where her warmth had been. Her hand lingered on my shirt for one last heartbeat before falling away. "We can't," she started, her voice softer now, almost breaking. I opened my mouth to argue, but then her phone buzzed on the desk, sharp and insistent. She glanced at the screen, and whatever color was left in her face drained away. "What is it?" I asked, stepping closer. She hesitated, fingers tightening around the phone. "Nothing," she said too quickly, setting it face down. But I saw it. The name flashing across the screen. The same senior partner who'd knocked earlier. "Someone knows," I said quietly, more realization than question. She didn't deny it. "They heard something," she admitted after a beat, her voice low and tight. "Last night. Us. Maybe just enough to start talking." My chest tightened. "And what? They think. They don't have to think." She cut in, sharper than she meant to. Then, softer. "Rumors ruin people faster than truth ever could." The words hung heavy between us. And yet, beneath the fear in her eyes, there was something else, something raw, unguarded. "Tell me what you want me to do," I said, closing the space again, slow but certain. Her breath caught, but she didn't move away. Instead, her hand brushed against mine on the edge of her desk, hesitant, trembling. That single touch said what neither of us could risk saying out loud. "This isn't just about me anymore," she whispered. "If they find out, they'll destroy you too." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. For a second, the mask she always wore slipped completely, and I saw her. Every fear, every want, every secret she'd been burying under perfect poise. "You should," she murmured, but her voice lacked conviction. Silence fell, thick and charged. She turned slightly, like she might step past me, and this before it could spiral any further. But as she brushed by, her shoulder grazed mine, and I felt her pause. Just for a moment, neither of us moved. Her hand lifted, almost without thought, trailing the edge of my sleeve before stopping midair, trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. I reached for her wrist, gently, steadying her. Her eyes met mine, wary, wanting, terrified, and something in that look told me the choice had already been made. She exhaled, shaky, almost defeated. "Then don't make me ask again," she whispered, so soft it was barely sound. And just like that, every line we'd been pretending to honor blurred into nothing. The office was silent except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. She didn't move. Neither did I. Her wrist trembled slightly beneath my fingers, but she didn't pull away. "This is it," she whispered, her voice thin but steady. "If we do this, there's no going back." My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. "Then stop me," I said, low and rough. "If that's what you want, tell me to walk out that door, and I will." For a long moment, she just stared at me. Her breath came shallow, her chest rising and falling like she was trying to wrestle her own heart into submission. And then, slowly, almost painfully, she stepped closer. Not a word, just that small movement that erased the last inch of space between us. I felt her hand press lightly against my chest, not pushing me away but anchoring herself, like she was afraid she'd fall without the contact. My own breath faltered as I reached up, brushing my thumb along the line of her jaw, tracing the soft tremor of her pulse beneath her skin. "You don't know what you're asking for," she murmured, though her eyes betrayed her, wide, dark, wanting. "Then show me," I whispered back. Something in her broke then, not in a way that made her weak, but in a way that made her real. The careful walls she'd built around herself crumbled, and in that instant, she stopped fighting. She leaned in, her forehead resting against mine, our breaths mingling in the narrow space between us. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of everything we'd denied, every glance, every almost touch, every unsaid word. And when her hand slid up, fingers curling lightly around the back of my neck, I knew there would be no walking away. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Stay." It was all the permission I needed, not a command, not a plea, just the truth she'd been holding back for too long. I closed the last sliver of distance, my hands steady on her waist, her body melting against mine like it had been waiting, like it had always been inevitable. In that moment, there was no boss, no risk, no rules. Just two people caught in the gravity of something neither of them could fight anymore. When she finally pulled back, just enough to look at me, her eyes were different. Clear. "Sure. Now you understand," she said softly. I nodded, breathless, my pulse still hammering in my chest. "Yeah," I said. "I do." The fear was still there, of what came next, of what it might cost, but it no longer mattered. Because for the first time, we weren't pretending anymore. The city outside was quiet, the office nearly dark except for the faint glow of the streetlights slipping through the blinds. She stood there for a long moment, her hands still resting lightly on my chest, like she wasn't quite ready to let go. I didn't move either. For the first time in weeks, there was no need to fill the silence, no pretending we didn't know exactly what this was. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft, almost uncertain. "You know this won't be easy." I nodded. "I know. And people will talk," she added, her eyes flicking away, as if saying it out loud might make it less painful. "Let them," I said simply. "I'm not going anywhere." That made her look back at me, her guarded expression softening into something I hadn't seen before, a quiet relief, mixed with something warmer. She exhaled, her shoulders loosening for the first time in what felt like forever. When she stepped closer again, it wasn't rushed or frantic. It was steady, intentional. She rested her forehead against mine, her fingers curling around my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You make me feel seen," she whispered, and those 4 words undid every piece of doubt I'd been carrying. I squeezed her hand gently. "You make me feel like I belong," I said. We stayed like that for a while, no titles, no secrets, just 2 people breathing in the same quiet moment. When she finally pulled back, she smiled, small but certain, and leaned up to press the softest kiss to my forehead. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was real. Later, we sat side by side on the edge of her desk, her hand tangled in mine, the silence between us easy now. There were still questions hanging in the air, how to navigate work, what came next, but none of them felt as heavy anymore. Because for the first time, we'd chosen each other, fully and without hesitation. She turned her head, meeting my eyes in the dim light. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "we'll figure it out. Together." And for the first time, I believed it. When we finally left the office, the city was still and half asleep. She walked beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed, her hand occasionally finding mine as if to remind herself I was real. And with every quiet step, every stolen glance, the fear that had been sitting heavy in my chest slowly eased into something else. Something warm. Because it didn't matter what tomorrow looked like. Tonight, she wasn't my boss, and I wasn't her employee. Tonight, we were just us. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?